I think you added. Now, now I cannot speak anymore. Yeah, I have really not so much time. So I had, I think, 45 to 50 minutes. And Ed asked me to show more projects. So because I curated around 200 exhibitions, so what should I show you, you know? And although that always sound included, it means how you can get an idea about a work. So I skipped this kind of theory part of my little talk to show you a bit more and explain you some projects. I started as a musician, so I studied trombone, a real trombone, like playing Bruckner and everything else. Then I stopped and I become fascinated by sound, not organized in a musical way, organized as a material with textures, tension. You can go around sound, what is always in the music world a bit more complicated when you are not a musician, as for the audience. So I started to study at Helga de la Motte Haber. She is a musicologist in Berlin, and she teaches, I think, till 2010 around. So I was her student, and she was the only one in Germany who teach sound art, contemporary music, sound art. And so I get a pre-diploma in sound installation art, funny wise, and that was also the end of my academic career because I started to work in the art field and the music field. First I organized concerts a lot, worked with musicians together with an ensemble, organized festivals. And then in 2095 I arrived at a place. I'm coming from East Berlin, maybe it's good to explain this. So when the war coming down, I have the chance to go to West Berlin and take my studies at Helga de la Motte's classes. And in '95 there have been still a lot of empty buildings in East Berlin and a lot of artists coming to Berlin, moving into these buildings, making exhibitions, concerts and everything else. So there was a group of artists and cultural workers who find out about a space really in the center of town, of East Berlin, nearby the Alexanderplatz, as mentioned from Ed. It was an old Baroque church. There have been only 2 Baroque churches in the center of Berlin Mitte. And this church was empty because it was a ruin in the World War II a bit, then it got a roof, and then it was a storage for 30 years. That means a storage for different kind of chairs and from a company. So you can imagine that a space like this, which you will see later in some pictures, going out of the memory of the people who are living in this town, because you have no access anymore to this place. So the idea of this, because the company went bankrupt, and the idea of the artist being, let's make some artworks here. It was not a religious company. It was really like, oh, what for a space? And I started in '95 to work there, and soon I find out that it's important to focus on a special theme in such kind of space and not doing everything. And that was finally sound art, because I was a little bit familiar with that. And this time you have to travel around Europe at least to get the experience of a real work. And I think it's really important to get this real experience from a work, because you can have a look in documentations like today when I show you some pictures or playing you some sounds, or you can read some text. But this work, installation works or sculptures, needs, in my understanding, the presence of the visitor. That means as a curator I have to go around and to get an idea about an artistic work, of an approach to a space, but also how an artist working with sound, in which direction. So that means in this time you have to travel around. There be no any place dedicated to sound art in this way, like what I did then from '96 or 1996. Funny wise, 1996 was also the founding year of this now or later called Diapason Gallery from Michael Schumacher in New York City. So we find out that it was a good year to do some projects in this world more focused on sound art. So there was a space I want to show you a little ground map. It was around 800 square meter big space. That is the main nave, and you see there's no column. That means there's already a big space to do something inside. The view is free. And the interesting thing was, because of this bomb attack, and the destruction. The tower was completely okay, but the main nave was destroyed, but only the roof. So, and they put after this a roof, a wooden roof on it again. That means the space was closed, but it have no cupola anymore. And the cupola, as you maybe know from personal experiences, when you're going in a place with cupolas, like for example under the subway, and sometimes in parts of Queens, you have really strange effects there, acoustic-wise. So a cupola is always difficult to deal with. So that was really an interesting space to have sound installations there. For example, there have been before, in '95, without the gallery, there have been an sound installation from John Cage, and there have been a sound installation from Robbie Minard, a Canadian sound artist. There have been a sound installation from Brian Eno from London, also in the big nave. So we arranged a lot of different kind of events, but already also sound installations. And then I decided, let's go more in this direction, totally focused on sound installation art or sound sculpturing art. Because I come from music, for me it was in the beginning like, okay, sound is listening. That's why the name of the gallery is Listening Gallery, or Hoergalerie, how Ed said it in German. And so it's not a sound gallery, it was really, the subtitle was Listening Gallery. And we called it Singuhr because this building from the 17th century got, in the beginning of the 18th century, the biggest glockenspiel in Germany, which was destroyed in World War II. But interesting, it was also part of the broadcasting. Maybe you know the BBC Big Ben bells. Hopefully you can get it, I think, somewhere in the internet. And it's still sometimes running, only in the broadcasting. So it's become a kind of significant jingle before news or whatever in the broadcasting station from Germany, the Deutschlandradio, in the 20s and 30s. So it was a kind of place which was already connected with an instrument, with a carillon, which you can play. There have been live concerts with musicians and the carillon. Thousands of people have been around. There are nice photos from this time. And you can listen it also far away, like 2 kilometers away when the wind was good. You can listen to the play of the carillonneur, the guy who plays the glockenspiel, the carillon. So it was a place, I think, already dedicated to sound in a way, in opposite to maybe other places. So then we start to set up an organization to get some funding. It's always a thing. So I'm not an artist, I'm a curator and producer. That means we have to find money, and then we have a collaboration in '96. In the first year, there had been a big festival in Berlin called Sonnambiente. The name came out from the famous sound sculptures from the American artist Harry Bartoya. Maybe you know him or you heard about him. We have also some public sculptures here in the States. And so this festival, we had a cooperation, and we get 2 artists paid completely, the whole project paid from the festival. And I can decide which artist it was. I got a list from artists, so it's really nice. You know, you need no money, you get money, you get an artist, the travel cost, everything was paid. So we start first with another project, and I want to show you after this little, I have to find my mouse again. I'll show you some pictures now. So this was a first exhibition in '96 in April. That was really simple. Been this little tables with black boxes on it, and you can open it. It's formerly cigar boxes out of wood, but transformed into little interactive objects. So every table you see, there have been some tables in the space, and this was not a big space. It was a small space in the tower on the 3rd floor. And it looks a bit like a cellar or like a basement, but it was really high up. You have to climb stairs up in the 3rd floor, and you arrived in a kind of, I called it a kind of listening place, because it was already a little bit over the level of the buildings around. You can listen to the city also often, bad for the recordings on the daytime. And it was, the good thing was the walls looking like really reverberant, but it was not like this because they put out all the concrete from the wall to make it drier. That means the acoustic in the space was really dry. That means open for a lot of different artworks with sound. So I play you, this was another piece between the two left and right chambers. It was automatically, you put your feet on the button and then this ensemble play open the closing and playing different sounds. You see on the left side a half open one, and for example when you open it, depending on the angel, you can sample different sounds out of, you can pitch sound, you can make it loud or light, loud or loud or yeah, whatever. So you can really play with it, and you can let it open, and you can make your own composition. And we made a later on a recording, because in this time you can imagine when you start with such a project, you don't think about documentation. You only think about how we can finance it and how we can realize it, because that was also kind of untypical in this time that we financed the whole project. So normally in this time, artists not getting in Germany, artists not getting any fees for set up something, because everybody's saying, oh, you're becoming famous because you have a show, and then you can get on the art market, and then blah blah blah. But as a sound artist, it's really difficult to sell works because it's kind of ephemeral. And that's why I come from music. When we ask a composer to make a composition or to write a new piece, then for the commission we have to pay. So I put this principle from the music into the sound art, and we paid from the beginning for the next 18 years, I think over 88 commissions for new pieces, sometimes even more than one. And then we made later on, because then 2 years later I find out it's good to have at least some photos, what the artist is doing sometimes themselves, and all the recordings, sound recordings. So I want to play you a little bit of this when I find my mouse back. Okay. So maybe you get at least an idea. So it was like DIY, so to say. In these days, nobody knows this word, this do-it-yourself electronics. But in '96, '94, he already doing it since years. And he's also one of the only East German artists who working with sound in this way. So it was a kind of nice reference. Later on, we did the next exhibition was one an artist group consisting of a composer, a visual artist, and a programmer. So there was a net of copper wire, you see, hundreds of meters of copper wire. It was like 3 weeks installation and 3 weeks on show. That was for the artist a kind of nightmare, because although it's an historical building, you cannot put any nail in the wall, so you have to find a way to attach it between the stones and so on. And a lot of crossings of wires had little piezo speakers, and they are only having one information, click, 1-bit information speakers. And they have been programmed, like you can walk into really carefully, and they've been like 20 centimeters on over the floor. So you have the sound always around you, but on the floor, it stay on the floor, and the clicking, and it was like the clicks being like moving through the field from left to right or back and forth. And so you see this is a kind of view in the space again in one of the chambers. And finally nothing happened. It was never broken. The people been really carefully, but it's also changing every day. The idea was it's kind of algorithmic composition that always you never know what's happened with this little clicks, so they're moving around, and it's been only like this plus minus signal from each wire that's activating always the piezos. So then later on it was a piece with speakers, even a piezo is a so-called speaker. Then we, after this, we had a piece that was part of this festival. It is a big Orion Harp, again without any real speaker. So maybe I like more speakerless works, I don't know. We showed also a lot of work with speakers. But well, this is a 6-meter long Orion Harp from Monahan, a Canadian artist. And to create this kind of wind, which is running here through this kind of little gap, where the strings being horizontal and start, 6 strings, piano strings, you have to create an extra space to create that the wind going through it out through the door to the staircase. So this is also part of this kind of, you see, the complete Foley construction. You listen always a lot of movement from the Foleys. And the interesting thing was, and that's also something about artistic work and also production. So there was a lot of work you can imagine to make this, and it's a wooden frame at the backside, or like a plate as a kind of resonator. In front is a plexiglass. You can read text about Orion winds from the 19th century and sound out of Orion winds. But to bring the sound through this huge Orion Harp into this, that the strings can start to vibrating and making sound, it was really difficult. And then to make wind, like this typical wind in buildings, when you open a window, it's not because the wind blows or somebody blows into space. This happened because of the physics. Gordon Monahan studied all the physics, not only music with John Cage, he also studied physics some years. You need a cold and a warm space. And because of the warmth outside, it was summer, and the church is always cold inside when you have no heating system, and that have no heating system. That's always when you open only a window and the door, then the wind crossing. The problem was at the opening coming so much people that the space was so hot that it's never started to sound. All the 6 weeks, not anymore, because there have been more than 100 people or 200 people out over the whole opening sing. And the space never becoming the space never even caught again. So we try a lot of things after the opening times, but it was a kind of, it was a project was, I think, even not failed, but it's happened when you're working with natural environments and try to amplify it. But we had a really nice recording from before the opening, a small one, a really small one, because there was a film team, and I want to play you this to get an idea how an Orion Harp and how beautiful it sounds. Oh, I don't have it. No, I let it away. So, but maybe I'll play you better the other one, the next project. This was in the first time in '98. I have to run a bit, you see. That was in the main church. You see a part of the church already. That was a piece also without loudspeakers. It's working with singing, so-called singing flames. It's an invention from the 19th century from Frédéric Kastner, a French guy who invented a fire organ. Even there have been a lot of compositions for fire organs and orchestra, for example, from the 19th century. So this artist studied in Hamburg by the Fluxus artist, with the Fluxus artist Henning Christiansen, and developed in this time the idea that he wants to work with singing flames. What we find out about this Kastner instrument, which is not existing real, but it's play not anymore because you have not the gas and so on. So he built this huge construction running by hydrogen. So we had a lot of bottles of hydrogen on the rooftop of this church, what you cannot do here in an official building. We've been really an independent art organization. So I take the risk on my side, because when this will be explode, you can imagine a little roof from a church will flying over the whole city of Berlin. But nothing happened, and it was a beautiful sound and wonderful sound, because it's also a big space, you need more power. That's why he decided to use not propane, what you're normally using, he's using hydrogen. And maybe you know La Montagne. Oh. Now I did a mistake. Sorry. It's okay. So somebody recorded me here. Sorry for that. Okay. Yeah? You had something? So I play you some sounds of this. Oh, that's wrong. Second. you see a little bit the dimension. The whole glass was 4 meters long. The space is already 18 meters high, and we hang everything from aft because it was too dangerous to put it nearby the visitors. And there'd been 4 of these flames on each part of the square in the middle of the church. This is a kind of a drone, as you can listen, because you can tune, depending on the length and of the power of the flame, the sound which is coming out of the tubes. And this little big metal plates in the back are more like directing the sound back to the space. But there have been always beatings in the space. That means you have to move around. This is one typical thing for sound installations. What's also make it for me interesting. The artist provide something, and without the visitor, nothing happened. So there's still sound when nobody is in, but the piece you get only when you're going into it and you enter it, and you've been open enough to take your own ways in the space to get different kinds of beats and mixtures in the space. That is typical La Monte Young principle, what he made in real time with analog sine wave synthesizers or generators. But this was really natural produced by the flames. And to record it, normally you need a binaural microphone to walk around, but we didn't do it because the quality of the binaural is not so good for the bass. So we changed you will listen sometimes every 2 minutes, like the place of the recording. I can try to go to another place, short. So this is one of the main, I think, important principles in sound art, which is also in the artwork, in visual art the same, or more or less the same. The visitor's own time is an important part of the artwork. That means the composition, in a way, this kind of musical composition or sound composition, it's happened only because of your own perception, of the individual perception. So he did another work, but I don't want to show you this, otherwise we're running completely out of time. I only show you a picture because he works also with organ pipes, and he destroys the labium, or you put metal screws inside so to change the tuning, and it have a kind of system with glass tubes with an organ blower giving always the same air pressure in the whole system. That means they're constantly sounding, but it's always changing when you move around. Here you see it a bit more from nearby. Then in 1999 we invite Arvin Lussier, the American sound artist and composer, to doing a piece which called Empty Vessels. That is already an existing piece. It's now in the collection of the Musée Art Contemporain in Lyon. But it's not easy to install it. It looks simple, some vessels, and on the opposite side speakers. And you see here a little bit nearby, there are always nice Neumann microphones in every vessel, because every vessel has a resonance frequency inside, because every space inside the vessel listening what's happening outside. So, and this is connected, each vessel with an opposite speaker. That means you're creating a feedback, and the feedback you have to tune. And for this we hired Nick Collins, a formerly student of him, now professor in Chicago since some years, for sound and sound art. And he made a really nice tuning of the feedback. And when you're moving into the space, you're changing always, because you're cutting the feedback flow, you're changing always the sound output from the piece. So you have to be careful, but there's a controller limiter in between, so it's never really exploding. But yeah, it's a really beautiful piece. We had a recording. Maybe our book is on the library, I don't know, the first one, where you've been in? No? Okay. So then we did with him, and now you see the big space a bit better. we made another piece with Arvin. It's called Twins. Maybe you know his famous piece, The Long Thin Wire. It's formerly a performance piece from the 70s. He transferred later on in an installation. And normally it's one wire as long as possible in the space, run by a sinus wave generator, giving a special frequency on this. There's a big magnet on the top. That means that the floor of the wire is free and under pressure from the magnets. And then on the other side are two contact microphones that it's transferred into the space. And because of that's all I want to show you, because I asked him, we want to have a site-specific and new work, because he made over several, 7, 8, 9, 10 installations. He saw this double window, which was before the entrance to the organ, because there had been before an organ. After the big fire in the church, the organ was completely demolished. And he saw these two windows and said, oh, let's doing 2 wires. And so he installed 2 exactly the same wires from 36 meter long, running by one generator, and it's have completely, not completely, but often different kind of outputs from both wires, because we microphone both wires on 2 different channels. So that was really interesting, and yeah, this is a little nearby. This is another project consisting of hundreds of loudspeakers. So we bought from a trash 300 or more loudspeakers for the artists. It's all the American artist Benoit Maubré. He lives in Berlin since years, and he built a kind of igloo out of this. There was the only sound was going on, everything was under power. The speakers, there have been some amplifiers even in between. It means we have this kind of noise what we have already here from this beautiful machine what's hanging there. But it's a bit more, you can imagine we have 300 different noises out of this, and the mix was really interesting. You can go in, you have a kind of effect from the cupola, and you can work around outside to see all these trashy speakers. And after this, the thing was demolished and it went back to the same company where we bought it for, I think, 100 euros. It's 400 loudspeakers. So then we didn't have to pay even when we gave it back. That was a good thing. So that stands in this big church. And maybe at the end of this period, I at least have to go back. I want to show you really quick, because I'm here and you know this guy. I want to show you shortly. It's not good quality. The pieces of Ed Osborne. That was in 2001. He mentioned it already in the beginning or in the middle of your residency time in Berlin. You've been even a bit longer there. What's normally every artist doing. Sometimes people staying still, but you got this job here later on. So that was a piece in the staircase, a sound piece with speakers. So I don't want to say too much. I only want to show the pictures, otherwise the time is running. That was another place. So the tower had already 4 spaces what we can use. So we always can make in every exhibition a kind of special setup, depending on the ideas of the artist, how it works together, the money, the budget in us. So that was in a really small sacristy space, so-called, a piece with sensory lights, right? And this was in the belfry. You remember maybe the space from the first pictures. It's been sculptures with ventilators, fans, and speakers on the side. Really nice, moving, kinetic sculptures. You see one. I think every sculpture had even a name, right? Every sculpture had a name, a kind of name. Flying Machines was the title, you see. So and this was only, you have also a big piece in this big space, in the 700 square meter space, but I have no photo with me at the moment. But this was one of the devices who was sounding there, but it was really small, and you see nothing, but you listen. There have been some speakers, hidden speakers, I think so, right? There was at least a lot of speakers playing this sound into the space, but you didn't find the source. It was difficult to find it. It was really somewhere, and it was really magic, this piece. So that was a little kind of insert. So then, after some years, we moved to another space, because it was already 2006, the last exhibition what we did there. I don't want to show it to you, because impossible to play the sounds here, because I cannot move the speakers. It was with Marianne Amarché, a pioneer in sound art and composition. Hopefully you know her. She lived not far from here in Kingston, and that was an amazing piece. In the hall tower she made a kind of sound film piece from 90 minutes, the whole piece starting in the ground floor, going up to the last floor, looking into the space, and with a huge composition. It was her first vertical sound installation. And that was something, because she always hitting the space in a way. She's not playing music in a building. The building plays her music. That is really an important difference. And so that's why I think this space was completely uploaded with her energy, with the sounds. So, and then at the same time, by chance, we got the news that a communication agency take over the space, making nice parties there, because the church community want to get money out of it. Because we always burning money with the artworks, we never make money for them. So we decided to go away. And it was also after 11 years with, I think, 70 exhibitions around, already something. And we moved to another space. We applied for another space, which I know from before, because I made also other projects in other places. We moved to 2 underground water reservoirs in Prenzlauer Berg in Berlin. Also here a little picture only from the ground map. I love ground maps. It's a huge water reservoir system from the 19th century, which was built on the top of the hill to consist the water like in a lake, to bring it without any energy to the households in the neighborhood. So the house has been always not bigger or higher than this tower there, because the whole system works that the pressure brings the water always when you open something in your toilet or in the kitchen, then you're getting the water out of the reservoir. So it was only pumped with energy from the river Spree from 5 kilometers away up to the hill. That was the only energy what you need. So they built first the small one, which was formerly an open lake, and later on they closed it. And later, because they need more water, Prenzlauer Berg becoming bigger and bigger, more and more people. It was one of the densest districts in Europe. There have been like houses with hundreds of people living in the first yard, second yard, fifth yard, eighth yard, sometimes was huge. And so they need more water and then more water supply. And then they built a second one. And it was only like 15 years in use. It was much bigger. As you see, it was on the level of the street. It's by you have to build a big construction. Maybe you remember when you're seeing an old big church like in Paris or this Gothic church, they're having always this kind of huge, nice, beautiful empty spaces. But on the side, everything becoming more dense, because that holds the whole building together. So that you see also here on the big water reservoir, you have the last ring, the outer ring, consists of little chambers, like 33 chambers around, to make only the structure a little bit more powerful, because 9,000 cubic meters of water have a lot of pressure. When you open, there have been also no door. The door comes later on, so the doors been not there. So that been really interesting spaces, because we playing with both with installations. And the left one, it was more like a cistern. The right one is more like a sculpture. So it was like a labyrinth. The right one have even 18 seconds of reverberation. That means the artist who is coming, and you have to see and get the space before to realize the work there. When you're coming with a ready concept and going into the space, you will die. The space kills you, because it makes something what you're not expecting, you know. So this is also part of the site-specific work, which I really love, because you have to deal with the situation. You cannot come with ready products. And we did several exhibitions and installations there for like 6 years. And I show you only some to get a kind of image, and maybe I play you one sound at least. Where you see the dimensions, maybe a bit from the space. It was a work from Edwin van der Heijden with 47 lights every 9 meters. There was a light and that reacting on the movement of the sound in the space. So that was a ring already. You see this, it's about 6 meters or more than 6 meters high. You have always this really special acoustic inside. And the sound there was only reaction of the recordings of the space themselves, because everybody who is coming into it making some noise, you know, when you're going on the floor, the people got some dirt, and that was amplified from the space in such a way that a microphone really far away can still listen it, and that would be sent out on a speaker on the other side, creating again a kind of feedback and being transferred in another ring, because every ring, depending from the, you remember the picture, the ground map, every ring have another space frequency. That means you can heat transferred via a computer program with a max patch. The sounds being recorded from the one ring in the other ring, but that means also that you make again recordings with a new. That's a bit. It was a kind of live composition. There been no any material was coming out. There was not any sound source. The sound source been only recorded first from the microphones and then played back into the space, which was interesting on this project. And then we've been in another space. It's a small water reservoir. You see that this have another structure. It's more like a cistern, and this is an artist from Vienna, Michael Moser, who is also a cello player and musician. That's why we decided together to make a concert installation. It's another type of installation, or concert, a mix of concert and installation. So the whole project starts in this middle space, which is bigger than you can see maybe on the photo, with a concert, for the 3-hour concert from 5 musicians, and they playing different sounds and composition into the space, but on opposite of each opening was a speaker. And maybe you know this famous piece, I'm Sitting in a Room, from Alvin Lucier. So that means this was recorded, was played back into the space. The musicians played with this kind of feedback. It's not a feedback, but it's a kind of back and forth. And then finally you get more and more like so-called space frequencies. So we don't want to open this door now what this really is, but it's something like this. And then after 2 hours, the musicians playing 2 hours, the last hour, they've been on the instruments, on the double bass, there was 2 percussion players, there been little transducers. They're transferring this just recorded sounds onto the instruments. That's the instrument sounding, but the musicians can go already for a beer. It was not so bad for them. And then after this 1 hour, we close it, and next day, in the night, the artist mix together with a sound engineer the whole thing again and put it as an installation into the space. So all the material what you can listen then was produced in the same space, which is also an interesting fact. And then he's using only transducers. So you see here this kind of huge glass plates running by one small Visatone transducer. So, and because normally you can go around, but you have the feeling you have chambers, but with the glass you're getting really chambers, because the whole glass becoming a membrane from a speaker, because a transducer is a speaker without a membrane, so to say, easiest. So every material where you put a transducer on becoming a membrane for the sound. That means you have the whole glass sheet sounding. It was 2.70 meters high and 1.70 meters wide. So you can look still through, but you feel that you are in an extra space, in a kind of chamber, because the sound creating this kind of chamber. And that been between all of this kind of columns you see maybe around, there have been a lot of glasses, I think 7 altogether. And they're playing always this composition. And then there have been extra metal sheets on the outer ring, 9 metal sheets, also running by 2 transducers, so that he be able to transfer a lot of the sound from the concert in different ways in the installation. And that's running like a loop for like 2 hours, and then it starts again. So I play you a little bit of the sound of it. And you can still listen deep, far away. I think the instruments will be the trumpet, bass clarinet and contrabass clarinet, two percussion players, and double bass. I think that's 5, right? So the interesting thing on this piece is that first the sound, all the sounds what you can listen being first filtered through the space. And then again, because of the transducers, being filtered through the material where they sound from. It means metal make a completely other sound, even not depending what you put on it, than a metal sheet, than a glass. And then it's also interesting where you put the transducer. So it's a lot of research. For this research, we bought even one extra glass plate with a lot of holes to attach or different positions to attach the transducer to get out where the best or interesting filtering processes be. Because you know maybe this famous Czech acoustician, philosopher and physic, Chladni, Friedrich Chladni, he invented, but he found out that you can look on waveforms, on different waveforms. When you put a special signal on a surface, then you can create different waveforms like flowers, you know, like mandalas sometimes. So that's the same thing. You have to research where you put this, and then you're getting a complete different sound when, for example, they've been always not on the same position. So he also play with the positioning of the transducer on the plate. Anyway, that was this, and then so then we've been still there a bit short running through. So that was the last year in 2013 in this space. It was a work from Jens Brandt, a German sound artist, or more like a conceptual artist. And he created a kind of planet model for the space because and he used a planet speaker as a kind of moving around Earth, you know, like a planet, but it's sounding. And it was a 70-meter long rail with a little car on the top, coming power from this yellow power supply, and it's running automatically in 1 hour around the whole space. And what it did, it's only recording. What you can listen was only the recording of, there was a microphone on the top, recording the machine which is running on this kind of railway. So that was the idea. He only amplified the sound of motors because it was also an industrial place, you know. It was a water place, but it was an industrial place. So funny-wise, during the installation, we realizing that because of the microphone, you're creating always, when you're coming nearby one of these bows, a feedback, and it starts to sing the speaker. So finally, every 5 minutes around, when it's crossing this special site-specific place, then it starts singing, the speaker singing a little feedback. It was really beautiful. And that's happened, sometimes such things happen and you have to accept it, or you even like it because it's nice. And in the middle, there's been another speaker, you see in half planet speaker running with the sound of the motor, of the electromotor, and that moves the whole machine there with a big mirror. That means you can see sometimes yourself, when the light changes, you can look through, you can see the space. So it was a way to connect the visitors with the space on the one hand, but also see this kind of, because all this speeches being different. So because of the mechanical devices on the ground, you see maybe here. So the speaker run at another speed than the lamp upstairs and even the whole big mirror. So that was like a planet system. Maybe you know this old mechanical planet systems from the 17th century out of gold, beautiful done, and you can, normally you move it and then you see, oh, the sun is moving around the earth. It was one of this fake news from this time. So anyway, so maybe I'll show you at least, it was the last piece in the big water reservoir from Max Easley, and I showed it often because it's kind of rounding the whole thing, because the first installation you saw, or one of the first, in the first year being an Orion Harp, and Max Easley is one of the artists, an English artist, who also working a lot with the Orion sound, and he create on the top of this, so under this hill, yeah, there's this water reservoir, and on the top in the middle is a little tower, because people have to go into this to clean it sometimes. So he put on the top these wind harps, altogether 8. They've been amplified with little contact microphones, and there you see the closing, there's the preamp, and it's going down into the big space and being sounded via 4 speakers in each ring. And then he added little objects like this Foley or this kind of chance operation instruments, because it have a little motor and it have a rhythm. And you can imagine with 18 seconds of reverberation, even in a big space, you listen everything. You're getting even this little signal, or when, for example, something attracting here, a little metal plate, a little ball, metal ball, and you hear it everywhere. And that's creating a kind of landscape. That's also something what is really important, I think, in installation art, that you kind of put an energy and creating a special atmosphere with sound, with light, with smell, with temperature into a space. That means you're getting not only the sound out, not putting only some speakers in 6 corners. You have to really think how you can bring a special energy in this space. That's what's really interests me. So you see, we're always doing this kind of special works in really special spaces, a Baroque church, a kind of shelter, or like a water reservoir, which was even not built for human beings, it was built for water. And in the meantime, because you cannot ask every artist to make such a work in this space, not every artist can do this. Sometimes even we want to work also with youngers, maybe they have not so much experience with such a big space. So we're making always, or producing always, smaller exhibitions in little galleries, like project galleries, white cubes more or less, with still a special situation. So that means we had always like 2 to 4 exhibitions a year in the water reservoirs, and 1 or 2, depending on the budget, on the money, what we can get, the funding. We have in a smaller gallery space exhibitions. And in 2013, the money went already so much down that we did only like 3 exhibitions altogether. This 2, what you saw, and 1 in the gallery nearby. And then we decided, because we're becoming 18 already, that means we're becoming adult, to stop the activities. Because a gallery means, when you title something a gallery, you have to do like a gallery work, you know. You cannot make like in January something because you have money, and then next time in September. That means the season was always depending on the heating situation. There been nowhere heating, not in the church, not in the water reservoir, was always from May, June till October at least. So in the meantime, you can ask for money and writing proposals on applications to get for the next year money. That was good. So then we decided, okay, it's going down. We have to stop these activities after 18 years. So we're producing 2 books. So all this, I think 88 exhibitions are kind of well documented. Every book have a DVD with around 7 hours of sounds on it. You can listen it. Even in the last book, we noted on the DVD the position of the microphone, because I think it's important to get an idea about the situation, not so much to listen only to some sound examples, because it's not music, it's documentation. And then we decided to stop and open another project, because we can put it away. The gallery has the same age like my son. He's becoming 18, the gallery becoming 18, so I kicked him out of my home. And I thought, okay, let's close this. It was not really true, I not kicked him out. He left last year, he was 20. But I thought it's good to make something else. And still take the brand, because I'm still not on Facebook and other things, but I know that it's important when you created something like this. It's good to, when you want to work further in the city, then to go further with other projects with the same name. So we renamed it. Hoergalerie was done. I was also in a way happy, because it's not a listening gallery, as you can imagine. And I show you not all the things. There have been much more visual arts works, although without any sound, conceptual wise with sound. So I cannot show everything. You can imagine with 90 exhibitions, it means we need some hours. But then we stopped, and we opened a new project called Singuhr Projects. That means after this experience to working with artists over such a long time, we realized it's much, much more important to get funding for a residency, that an artist have time to work in a space. Not even here, the artists have like 10 days around, or 2 weeks sometimes, time to set up something. But a residency means also that you have time to try something, try and error. That's a really important fact in the arts. You have to listen to what you're producing. You cannot, in such a space or in other spaces, even in a normal gallery, I think it's good to try something, and then maybe also to put it away again. Maybe a night later it's coming back and it was a great idea. When you have not the chance, because you have like only 1 day to set up, or 2 days, then it's often really difficult to make a site-specific piece. And this is the main goal of the gallery. So we started with that, and it started kind of nice. So we made a final concert in 2014, already with a new name, On the Top of the Hill, with the 2 water reservoirs, with 200 musicians. We asked Arvin Curran to write no, that was in Bonn. We asked an Austrian composer to make a piece extra for the space, for this city space. So that means there have been a lot of non-professional and professional percussion players and wind bands coming out of the city. So it's, when you're going one time to Prenzlauer Berg, you see there are a lot of streets going to this place, to this little park. And you can stand on the top. There have been like more than 3,000 people, so going up and down. You can stand on the top and you can listen to the whole city. It's a little bit this kind of, maybe you know the Charles Ives thing. He's standing on the bell tower on the church, and there'd been a kind of party or kind of thing in the city, and he listened to all these different movements of the brass bands in the city. So that was this feeling, and I really liked it. But it was something which was not an installation; it was a concert. So and then we started with residencies with different artists from Estonia, from other places of the world. And one of the big projects that are now running out of time, I think, already, because I made, since 2 years, we created a project between Mexico and Germany. That's why I'm here. It's an exchange project for Mexican and German sound artists. So I had some research time already in 2008 in Mexico. I met a lot of interesting artists who are working with sound there in a special way, not like this German way. It's more like artists working with sound, not sound artists. And we make an exchange. So it started in 2015 with 2 projects, and last year we had a big exhibition in Mexico City in 2 museums. One is a media art museum, the other one is an art place in an old church. So I was kind of trained to working in churches. And then this exhibition we took over to Berlin. But you cannot do, every artist have one space, sometimes 200 square meters, sometimes 400 square meters. You cannot put the same art piece in a space from 9 square meters. Because in Berlin we had a gallery with 9 exhibition rooms, and they've been much smaller. The biggest one I think was 60 square meters, and the smallest one was 15. That means all the artists coming to Berlin, they know already where they should exhibit. Sometimes they can make a variation of the same work, and sometimes we're making new works. So that means finally we had no any transport to Berlin, which is good in the art world, because transport and insurance today are much expensive than paying artists, funny-wise, because the companies want to make money. So I can show you when you want, at least some pictures from some works, because it's also, that's not anymore this nice buildings, that's a gallery space. So the first thing what I have to decide is to invest a big part of the money in isolate all the spaces, because the spaces being for visual arts exhibitions completely connected. So I asked an architectural office to build special or different kinds of acoustic border situation to close that somebody not can listen in the one piece, the other piece. And it works quite well. And second. So to show you also the variety of possibilities, here's some examples. For example, this is a piece from Arturo Alcazar, a 36-year-old Mexican artist who working often with sound but really conceptual. So there's been a kind of setup with an empty box with this kind of outdoor speakers and some materials, and then there was a performance on the opening where they're mixing concrete, and there was sound running out of these 7 speakers. It was a mono source, been recordings from what he made in Europe, mainly from demonstrations from Le Pen. He was in Austria before. There'd been a kind of right-wing movement. We made a lot of recordings of this stuff, like brass bands and bad words, but not so much talks from politicians, but the surrounding. And during the performance, this thing, here you see the empty one. And finally, it looks like this, the exhibition. It was completely, the concrete was inside. You see all the material left, after the performance, and it was quiet because the speakers being filled with concrete and they cannot sounding anymore. Even the sound running in the backside in a little box. So that means it was a kind of conceptual piece with sound, and it's still sounding, but you cannot listen to anything anymore. You see, this was a final situation in the space. So that's already, it's also good because when you have a sound exhibition to have something like this, you need, it have to be even quiet, because when you hear all the other works that although that make no sense, but I like the situation of this activity, which is a typical thing for a Mexican artist often, and he's working really conceptual wise. Here's another piece that is not there, it was later on in another version in Berlin too. This is from a pair of artists, Marcela Armas, a really important 38 years old artist from Mexico City, together with her partner, and although in this case first time artistic partner, a really great media artist who got last year the Ars Electronica pre-select for hybrid art. So they're making a project together where we rent for nothing from the Institute of Astronomy a 3-ton iron meteorite. And I don't know, it was really expensive, not only to get this meteorite to this place, it was a nightmare. And they're building this kind of instrument around, because an iron meteorite have magnetism still. That's just a nice thing that you're going in this natural science museum so you can touch it. The kids like to touch it, because you're getting some energy from the space maybe. So, and what is interesting, because when a meteorite falling down onto the Earth, it's compressed. That means all the sides have a different kind of magnetism. It's not always the same. So there's been a lot of sensors, and this instrument moving around, because you cannot move you can move in 3-ton stone, but it makes a lot of noise. So that means the instrument moving around the stone and take always in real time the power from this magnetism and put it in datas. And it was not a sonification what you can listen in real time in the space. You see there's non-directional speakers. This was a kind of formerly church, it's now an art place, ex Teresa, in the center nearby the Zocalo in Mexico City. So it's the sound what you can listen coming out of the harmonies, out of folk songs from Indians who were living before in the place where the meteorite falling down. It was a kind of connection between the place where they found the meteorite and the neighborhood, the human beings there. Because you see that it's a completely Baroque church, really nice. There have been always this kind of thing, something come from above, but then it was a meteorite, it was not God anymore. So it was a kind of play with this situation also. Oh. You see it, so the sensors taking always in real time this changing magnetism power. So maybe something else. This was a piece from even younger artists from Mexico, also really conceptual because it's also not sounding. But that was the idea to produce a virtual, with an architect together, a virtual 3D animation from the space where it was exhibited. It is a media art, the only media art museum in Mexico, the Laboratorio Art Alameda, and this is one space there. And they put a kind of virtual 1000 Hertz tone in this 3D model, and they're showing the reflection of this sound. So you see when the 3 streams coming together, it was even been normally 4, but one was broken in the process of the setup. So that is the sound going in different directions, and the artist decided only which direction she took and what's looking nice. So it was a kind of artistic decision still. And what you see is like how the sound becoming bigger and bigger and becoming like big streams going around, you know, like crossing, sometimes not in 90 degree. So it's becoming like a sculpture without, you can listen nothing anymore, but you can see a little bit how the space react on this kind of tone. And she did the same thing in September. She had a residency for a month in Berlin before, in April last year. She did the same thing in another space in Berlin, which I can show you so you see the idea that where it's coming from. Here. I learned today something from a nice supporter. So this is the Berlin version in the gallery where we often exhibiting. Also our next exhibition in May will be there. It's a kind of big white cube space, but with a nice, really nice over ceiling window and kind of high. And you see that the sound source is here in the middle. It was not empty in between. Here there was on the right side there's a sound starting. And it's a kind of special wooden construction surrounded by concrete. So it was, the title of the piece was first Concrete Acoustics, and then in Berlin Concrete only. So another work which I show also next week in Oaxaca in Mexico. It was made already in 2015 in a residency at the Centrum Arte Musical and Arte Sonoro in Morelia. That's a really nice town with a big center of more for electroacoustic music. So they called it electroacoustic music and sound art, but they're doing not really sound art. So I thought I'd send them an artist who is working with concrete sounds like this French style musique concrete, but also working visual. So it's he's now 42, I think. Stefan Reuk is his name. He's a student from Ulrich Eller, one of the pioneers of German sound art, who is a professor in Braunschweig on the Art Academy. And he did this piece out of his time when he was there with papier-mâché and some concrete sculptures out of styrofoam surrounded by concrete. He found out that they have this in Mexico, not in Germany, this funny orange cables everywhere and this cone. So, and he always thinking or working in a way, here you see a full picture, being in two spaces, and being 8-channel sound. The sounds being, the speakers being sometimes you see on the right side in the cones, sometimes in this concrete sculptures. And there being some kind of little flags, what you're always seeing, a little bit like this Hinduistic flag. So they have a lot of flags there, little pieces of paper mainly in the city. And this is a kind of notation. The whole thing for him is a kind of 3D notation. So he make really exactly drawings what he's doing before from the situation, and then he transferred in a sound piece. And when you see it, it looks a little bit like a trash place, but it has a complete order. But only when you put the sound on. When it's working, when it's running without sound, it looks a bit boring. But with the sound together, it's becoming a really kind of a really, really nice installation. So that was, and you can imagine this kind of installation you can rearrange in another space. He knows already, for example, the space in Mexico City where it was on show. Funny-wise, it was a year. We make a deal, so we paid everything for the museum. It was the Contemporary Art Museum of this capital of in Morelia. But finally, they find a new director, and when I asked to transfer the piece now to Mexico City, it was completely destroyed. So you have to make it again in Mexico City. That's why he's now, because they're not destroyed in Mexico City, it's already in Oaxaca, and he will coming to the setup. He have to set it up. And he will do always a completely new variation. Maybe I can show you, because otherwise it's boring, also for an artist, I guess, to doing always the same. And you have to react on the situation of the space. And when he was in Berlin, for example, he made another version. So he made finally 3 versions. So this is Berlin. There was already, for example, a gray floor, kind of linoleum floor in this art place in Kreuzberg. But he took the part of the bottles, the plastic, with him to make the papier-mâché forms again in Berlin. And also some of the cones, but then he add, for example, because here you can go in the walls. In Mexico you cannot, it was forbidden to go in the walls in the second station. So, you know, because it's a historical building, blah, blah, blah. So here you can do it. also in Oaxaca. So he added this other black tones to the piece, and also he used colored little flags there to make this kind of notation. Yeah, maybe that's enough. Otherwise, maybe Q&A. It's quarter past around. What do you think? Ed? Huh? Okay. Yeah, sorry. You've been already alone.
So if there are questions or Carsten?
Was too much.
I have one. Two things.
Look, you get it. This nice thing.
This is our special microphone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Pass around, which is the sound for you guys recording. And that is when you're looking for projects, particular artworks, or sort of a body of work by an artist, and thinking about them in terms of presenting as part of your program, are there kind of key elements that you look for? In other words, what are the things that you see that say, like, hey, this project is really alive somehow, it's really translate?
Now this, yeah, what is really important, what I said, I think, in one part of this little talk, that I need to see something in real. So it's also good, like today, speaking with artists, because you get already an idea how somebody works. And I have a kind of already, I know a little bit how a work will work in the space, even when I see a photo. But still, I like to go to be with my body somewhere inside the work, even when it's only a flat screen, you know, but or something like this. So because there are a lot of facts, what you see also today, you can already see a kind of approach of an artist, the artistic approach. That's one part is a conceptual approach, but it's interesting. The other one is how somebody works with sound, in which way. The other one is approach to the space, how he works with the space. There are also artists who are not really dealing with the space because it's more sculpturing, or it's also not always necessary. You know, like I'm not a fascist, you know, but I like it. So in a way, the good thing is sometimes I get money for this what I like. So I like to speak with students. I don't like to give talks, but I get some money from Brown University. That's great to speak with the students, because just talk, I don't like it. So, but I do mainly this what I like. So that's a nice thing. That's why I'm kind of happy, because I can still do it. And I think everybody is in a way interesting, but I need this kind of personal experience from a work, and then I start to think about if we can do something together. So it's not to see a work and then I say, okay, this work I wanted to have in my exhibition. So it's happened one time from 100 or one time from 50. So we had, for example, we present a work from Carsten Nicolai, it was a table. Even then we made an extra variation of the piece, which was never happened again like this, depending on the situation. And we discussed it also, you remember, our work together. It's always a bit of a discussion. I think it's also important, or for me it's interesting. I don't not only be a fundraiser, because it's also nice to work with artists together and to see what's coming out, because I have not such ideas. I'm a really boring guy. So that, or at least not artistic ideas. And that's why I think I'm kind of open. There's not a system. There's this and this and this. Energy, I don't know. So I see sometimes a really interesting work, or I travel to Helsinki to see a work. So last time I went, I saw a work, for example, we're making a huge production in September with I think she's now 32 years, or really young, a Polish artist. And by chance I visit the architecture biennial, because I find it much more interesting than the art biennial in Venice, every 2 years. And or sometimes the states decided to give the pavilions in the garden, in the Giardinis, not to a kind of architectural office to present their work, so they give it to artists who are working with space. And they've been in a Polish pavilion in, I think 5 years ago now, yeah, 5 years ago, an exceptional sound art and sound installation from a really young, and this time like 28 years, young Polish artist from Gdansk. So, and I was really impressed, and then I keep it somewhere, you know, because then I read somewhere. So she was invited to a group exhibition in Budapest and said, no, you can give me the whole space or I'm not coming. because she works with the vibration, with the shaking the whole building. That means the group exhibition makes completely no sense. And she is also so strong and say no. It's like in this age, you know, people say no, it's good. I like sometimes you have to say no. And she did it. And then I got by chance a mail from somebody, not from her, we've been not in contact, a mail that she's doing something in Gdansk, a little installation, site-specific intervention. And then I thought, okay, let's take a plane from my private little budget what I have, and because nobody pay me, you know, I have also not rich parents, so I have to pay for their last days, I guess. But so I went there, and she was there by chance. I saw the piece, I was really impressed. We had a talk, and she was impressed that I'm coming. I said, let's do something. And then we tried it. She came to Berlin, and this space, what you saw last with the streams, and this is an artist space. It means there are 10 studios around. You can imagine when you're making sound. We had one piece from an Estonian guy who was a professor for sound art in Tallinn on the Art Academy. So that was already like a really nice sub-sound, you know, and the people becoming crazy. We cannot work in their studio anymore, you know. Like, so they started to hate us. And then, hi. And then she was there, and then she started coming in the space and said, okay, that's interesting. Like this was like what she did the whole time, like such a tiny little girl. And I said, okay, maybe we're looking better for another place. And then we find out we need another year or 2 years maybe, I don't know exactly. And we applied for a project in a really huge industrial space behind the Berghain Club. And we got the money. It's a really good funding from 100,000 euros. And so we're doing, with the same money where we're doing the whole group exhibition, we're doing one piece. So it's, you know, it's always depending on situations. I cannot say, let's do it like this, but it needs a while. Sometimes the artist waiting a long time. But it's not a waiting line. So it's really like, because I'm not asking somebody to wait. So I'm looking always around and see what's going on. I try it. So that's the way. There's no principle. You know, I not really have a kind of sketchbook where I say, okay, done, invite him. So that's not so my style. Okay, thank you.